thing done. So in 2020, we were introduced to a word. We'd probably heard of this word before, but it became part of our everyday vernacular. And that everyday sort of word now is pandemic. And so we are all very well aware of that, but I have a theory, and the theory is in the process of the pandemic, what it did is it kind of poured gasoline on an already existing pandemic in our culture, and that is the word and the term that I'm going to use is anxiety. I believe it just, I think anxiety was a real issue, and it compounded the issue even more. I actually think that the long-term effects of COVID, and there are many, but one of the greater ones is going to be the anxiety that has compounded in millions of individuals. I also have another theory, and the theory is that from government to media to social media, they want us anxious. And please understand, I don't think that that's a political statement. I think that's just the cultural narrative that we are in here today, that it behooves those that are in power to have us on edge all the time. In fact, I'll even just think about this. Politicians, and I'm going to say this from both ends of the aisle, but politicians love to create a narrative of chaos and then present themselves as the messiahs to rescue us from said chaos. Now, you probably have very different views on this, and we can disagree and still go to heaven, but I remember growing up in the 1970s. Does anybody remember what the global crisis of the 1970s was? The coming, what? Ice Age. And then it was a hole in the ozone. Y'all remember that one? Then it was global warming. Then it was climate change. Then it is climate crisis. I actually heard this term the other day, an existential crisis to save the planet. And politicians will always present themselves as the Messiah of the chaos that we are experiencing. Now, that's not to say that climate change is real or unreal. It's just what we begin to see. Media presents a narrative of chaos and then keeps us locked into coming back and back and back and back because they're going to reveal a little bit more about that narrative tomorrow. Social media allows every single one of us to create a false narrative of our lives that is perfect and awesome. And everybody else looks at that false narrative that we have of our own lives and says, "What's wrong with mine?" And all this does is just take the anxiety of today, the worry of today, and just piles it on. And as I talk about anxiety here today, I am certain that you're probably saying, "Brandon, if you only knew. If you only knew the anxiety that I feel all the time." And trust me, I get it. But I will say this. Anxiety is nothing new. Anxiety is nothing new. In fact, even in the Bible, 2,000 years ago, when the church was beginning, even Jesus was talking about the issue of anxiety. Paul talked about the issue of anxiety. I think it's even older than that. I actually think that we find anxiety issues even in the Old Testament. In fact, we're going to look at a passage of Scripture here today, and it's Psalm 121. That's page 516 in the Bibles in the seats in front of you. And I just want to kind of give you a picture of where Psalm 121 fits in the narrative of the Psalms. You see, there's different types of Psalms. there are psalms of praise, there are psalms of lament. This fits into what is called a psalm of ascent. In fact, there's actually Psalm 120 through 134 are in the category of psalms of ascent. You see, the city of Jerusalem was set on a high hill. And Jews, especially after the exile and they came back, Jewish people would make a journey to Jerusalem for one of three big feasts every year. And as they would make this journey, they would sing the Psalms of Ascent, that idea of that they're making a journey towards something. Actually, priests, as they would go up the massive steps to the temple, again, oftentimes would use Psalms of Ascent. And actually, in the New Testament church, we've kind of taken Psalms of Ascent to be representative, not the journey to Jerusalem, but the journey through life and into eternity. And so that's what we're going to kind of look at here today as we look at Psalm 121. And I want you to notice verse 1. I lift my eyes to the hills. I'm lifting my eyes to Jerusalem. I have my eyes and gaze and attention and focus set toward that. Now, I lift my eyes to the hills. For the Christian, we are on a journey, and where are our eyes focused? Not on a physical, literal place here on this planet, but we have our gaze and our sights on Jesus and ultimately eternity. But that idea and that anticipation of focusing in on the end of the journey is also met with anxiety from where does my help come? You see, there's the excitement and anticipation of getting to Jerusalem, but there's also the angst of what might happen on the way. And I think that's a perfect parable for our walk with Jesus. We know that today is not the end. Whatever is going on in our world today and however the wheels are coming off is not the end, but there is an end, and Jesus wins, and we can hold to that, but there's still anxiety of, but what is it going to be like until that happens? What's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my job? We have all of this anxiety of what will happen in the midst of the journey. And here's what happens, because we have this tension. There's the anticipation, but there's also the anxiety. And oftentimes, anxiety tends to overpower anticipation as we journey through life. Anybody feel that? Anybody feel that like it seems like anxiety wins the day? And so he says, where does my help come from? Where do I get help? Where do I get help on this journey? And folks, I understand this is a loaded question. Because I think if you were to ask people, where does your help come from? There are going to be many in the narrative of our culture. If you go into Barnes & Noble, even if you go into a Christian bookstore, oftentimes the largest section of books in a bookstore is called self-help. So whatever it is that you're going through, our culture says the answer is inside of you. And I have to say, if the answer to everything that is wrong with our culture is inside of me, we're toast. Really, we are. And that's true of every single one of us. Next year is an election year. Oh, let's just be honest. In American politics, we've made every year an election year. It never stops. But next year, it's a biggie, right? And people will buy into the fact that if my guy or my person just gets in office, then all will be right with the world. All will not be right with the world. Financial advisors will say it's in your pocket. Financial advisors will say if you have enough money, that's all the help that you need. There are many within our social structure today that will say if you don't like yourself, then change yourself. And the change yourself is not go buy some new clothes. It's not get a new haircut. It's not go pamper yourself. Now it's completely into change your absolute identity. Change everything about yourself. And we are far enough down this at this point in time to say it is not working. Some will seek help in their career, in people, in alcohol, in sex, in pornography, even the good things of marriage and family. But yet they're disappointed. And folks, I think we have to be real honest when we're talking about anxiety. We're talking about worry. We're talking about the soul struggles of life. The answers that the culture that we live in are that they're giving, the answers of marriage, of change yourself, of politics, all these different things, they're anti-biblical, they're anti-gospel, and they are anti-Jesus. In every way, shape, or form, they go against what the Bible tells us that we should put our hope in. So where does our help come from? So the psalmist reasons in verse 2, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Now, we've kind of established that we look for help everywhere but the Creator of heaven and earth. But he has reasoned that my help comes from the Lord. My help comes from God who is Creator. And we kind of land on that issue of Creator. Now, I read a book many years ago. Many of you may have read this. It's by J.B. Phillips. Your God is Too Small. And I think a lot of us probably need to read and reread that sort of book. And here's where the problem lies so many times when we think about God. And this is not original with me, but I heard this and it absolutely makes sense. So many times we view that like we're this, and God is simply a little bit better version of ourselves. Like if we're good, He's a little bit gooder. I know that that's bad at grammar. If we're strong, He's a little bit stronger. If I'm kind, He's a little bit kinder. And so I think one of the reasons why we do not depend upon God, why we do not see that He is our help, is that we see Him, again, as a little bit better than us. But the psalmist says, no, He's not just a little bit better than us. He is Creator of heaven and of earth. And when He says that, He is unlimited in power. He is unlimited in knowledge. He is unlimited in presence. He is better in every single way. I'll never forget, I was in my first ministry, and I was over visiting a widow in the church. And we were talking about the journey of the church. And I think in 40 years before me, they had like 10 ministers. And one of the ministers, his name was Don Vespremi. And actually, the Vespremi kids were in my youth group. You see, Don, while he was serving as pastor of the church, passed away. In fact, she said, I've got a cassette tape if you'd like to hear his last sermon. And if you don't know what a cassette tape is, ask your parents. And it's still in my office. You see, Don had heart problems. He had massive heart problems. And his heart problems were such that they were genetic and that no male lived past the age of 50. So he was preaching a sermon on Sunday and leaving for Houston the very next day to go have heart surgery where he knew he would probably die on the table. And one of the questions that he brought up as he was sharing with the church for the very last time is that people kept asking him, like, so you've got heart problems. We've got heart surgeons in Abilene. Abilene's a pretty good-sized town. We've got heart surgeons here. Why are you going to Houston? Now, if you know anything about heart surgery, there's a doctor that was by the name of Dr. DeBakey. He was like, everything that we have in cardiology today kind of has its ancestry in him. And he was a pioneer of open heart surgery. He was a pioneer of this kind of medicine. And I remember him saying this, when my life is on the line, I want the master, not the student. And the psalmist is saying, when I'm on my journey and I'm freaking out at what might happen, I don't want the student. I want the master. I want the creator, the originator of everything, because he knows how I'm made. He knows how I tick. And so I'm going to depend upon him. And then he kind of explains it all. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. There's a reason why I don't preach from the Psalms very often. There's pretty much a reason why I don't preach from Job all the way to Malachi very often, because most of that is poetry. In fact, it's amazing to me how much of the Bible is poetry, and Brandon Schaefer's mind does not do poetry well. But poetry is absolutely a gift from God. And so I'll just give you a couple of items as we read on. Here's a couple of hints on how to read poetry in the Bible. Look for repetition. Look for words that are repeated. Look for ideas that are repeated, and that will help you kind of get there. Also, with that, look for patterns. And I have those books that actually help me find the patterns because I don't think I'm smart enough to get them there on my own. And so there's kind of a rhythm that kind of takes place in the song. And so when you're looking at repetition here, as we're going to kind of read on, and the version that we are in here today, you're going to notice keep or keeper or keeps 6 different times. When you see that much repetition, that means that this is an important concept. And this whole idea is that keep is watch and protect and guard and pay constant attention to. From a noun perspective, it is a watchman, a guard, a protector, and a keeper. So that repetition comes here, but there's also the pattern. And let me just kind of share the pattern as we kind of dive in for the rest of this here this morning. The pattern is assurance of what God will do, the actions of what God will or will not do, and then after that, there's kind of like this implication, kind of like the unspoken, that we are to pull from the assurance and the action. So let's go ahead and look at this pattern here today and understand what the psalmist understands about God as creator. He says this in verses 3 and 4, "He will not let your foot be moved, and he who keeps you will not slumber." There's again that keep. "Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." So let's just go ahead and look at the assurance here. The assurance is he's not going to let your foot slip. Now again, poetry kind of takes on the, where it depends upon imagery here. And you're probably thinking, well, I fell the other day. And so basically what the imagery here takes kind of the physical patterns of life and makes it into a spiritual concept. And they are on a journey, and falling and slipping and so on like that are a real possibility. But danger is also a real possibility as well. Not being able to get there is a real possibility. Sickness is a real possibility. But then it says here, like they're on a journey, they're taking steps, and it says that God neither slumbers nor sleeps. How many of you find that that's a comforting thing to know that God's never nodding off? All right? I love the picture even in 1 Kings where there's the battle of the prophets of Baal and Elijah the prophet, and he's like, maybe he's in the bathroom. You know, God never takes a break, right? And I think about this. I have 4 kids. All 4 of my kids are incredibly, incredibly different. I had one who was busy and hated sleep. He's our oldest. He would actually poke himself in the eyes when it was time to go to sleep at night as to not go to sleep. Makes no sense whatsoever, but it did to him. Our daughter was a climber. She just, anything that she could trek up, she was going to do. Joel, he is omnipresent. You turn your back, he's like right here. You turn your back, he's over here. He wasn't really destroying anything. He was just inquisitive. And Seth, you know, big Seth, curly hair Seth, he was so destructive. He was quiet, but he would just tear stuff up. Now, I've got a grandson. His name is Austin. And Austin is in one tiny human a convergence of all 4 of my kids. In fact, I got a video last night. Zach sent a video. He had given Austin a bath, put his jammies on, got him ready for bed, turned around, didn't see where he was. Another one of the siblings was taking a bath. He was back in the bath, fully clothed. I mean, just having a blast. Got him out, started to change him, pooped on the towel. I mean, it's like, this kid, if you turn your back, if you take a nap, right? If you take a nap, he will dismantle your house and burn it down while you're catnapping. God never has a need to rest or sleep. And therefore, his eyes are always on us. And the implication is God watches over the steps of your journey. So don't be anxious. God watches over the steps of your journey, so don't be anxious. Let's look at verses 5 and 6. The Lord is your keeper. There's that word again. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. So again, let's talk about assurance. God is your shade at your right hand. Now, we know a little bit about the power of the sun in the state of New Mexico. It's kind of one of those weird things. Like, it can be like 50 degrees outside, and if there's no wind and you're in the sun, you feel like you're on the surface of the sun. And it can be 90, right? And if it's like you go into the shade and you're not in the sun, it feels like you're on the North Pole. It's kind of how, like, and it's kind of a unique area of the world like that. But he's talking about the protection of shade. And shade is nourishment. It is provision. It is comfort. It's guarding. It's protecting. And then he says, okay, so this is the assurance, but here's what God's not going to do. God's not going to allow the sun to harm you by day or the moon by night. Now, I'm looking at this going, yeah, I've gotten a sunburn before, never gotten a moonburn. I've never had to squint because of the moon, right? Last time I went to the eye doctor, he said, you need to start wearing sunglasses more because I'm starting to get cataracts. Yay, right? Moon's not causing that. So, what's the deal? Again, this is poetry. Kind of like Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. You know, all of those things. Basically, it's a big, giant picture of saying God is with you and he's going to protect you. But when he says that he will not let the sun harm you by day or the moon by night, day and night is the totality of time. Day and night is the totality of the day. And so the implication is God is with you in the totality of time that you have here on this earth. Again, he doesn't slumber. So he's never like out to lunch. He's never taking a nap. He is constantly with you on your journey in the totality of time that we exist here on this planet. There's another picture here. But again, that implication is if he's with us in our time and on our steps or in our steps, we don't have to be anxious. Let's look at verses 7 and 8. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Now, if I mark in my Bible, I'm going to underline verse 8. The Lord will keep your going out and coming in from this time forth and forevermore. This is eternity. So the assurance here is God will keep watch over your life. He's not going to allow evil to destroy you. Now, you can invite evil in, but if you do that, don't blame God. He has provided provision in His Word to protect us from evil. But I think there's something pretty cool here. I want you to think the steps you take in the time that you have. And as it says in verse 8, you're going out and you're coming in, both now and forevermore. The going out and coming in, this is a big, giant, poetic way of saying in the steps you take, in the time that you have, in the space that you exist and fill on this planet, God is your keeper. He's your protector. He's your guide. He's your comforter. Both now and forevermore. Huge implication. And I think there's a huge implication for the church in a world where the wheels are coming off. Do you ever feel like they kind of are? Do you ever feel like you just kind of look around and I love the meme where the person's kind of squinting and it says trying to figure out what page in the book of Revelation we're in today. I don't think we're there yet, but it just seems like things are crazy. For those of you who have watched the Hunger Games, sometimes I say, like, I just feel like we're living in the Hunger Games. It's just crazy right now. But there's a comfort. There's a comfort here that God will keep us through the journey of life, the steps we take, the time that we have here, the space that we fill until eternity, and then He's going to keep doing it. It's not like that we're going to breathe our last breath or the trumpet is going to sound and we're going to be taken up and all of a sudden God says, okay, I'm done now. He will keep us both now and forevermore. And so, again, we're on a journey here. And it really, really kind of comes down to this right here. There's this whole idea, again, of anxiety and anticipation. And so many times, I don't know about you, I can say this about me. Anxiety wins the day. Worrying about my kids wins the day. Seeing everything that happens in the world wins the day. Looking at the stock market depends on the day. But the fact that we have to worry about this means that anxiety wins the day. But the psalmist says, not because of who we are, but because of who God is. Listen, this is how it needs to go out. Because God is a constant source of help. He's our watchman. He's our guard. He's our protector, our comforter. Anticipation of eternity must overpower anxiety. That's our bottom line. That whatever is going on right here, right now in our world, listen, is nothing compared to the future weight of glory that awaits us. That there is going to be a day, I say this at every funeral I ever do, I always read from Revelation where it tells us that there will be a day where He will wipe away every tear from our eyes. That there will be no longer death or pain or anything. That former order of things is going to pass away. And the reality is, whatever today is, and for today, for many people, it is going to be a lousy day. But there's a promise that there will be a day when there will be no more days like today. And so we hold out to the hope, not that things are going to get better here. Things are going to get worse. We hold out not to the hope of if we get our guy in office. We hold out not to the hope if this illness would just go away. We hold out to the hope not that my 401k will just outperform everyone else's. We hold out to the hope that Jesus is coming again. And that until that time, God is going to protect His church. He is going to guide us. He is going to guard us. And really kind of comes down for me is, am I going to let Him? You see, Psalm 121 is kind of similar to what Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. I mean, Paul is very practical here. It just basically said, listen, God, what He's taking you through right now, the journey that you are on, whether you know it or not, He is preparing you for eternity. He's preparing you for, I'm not going to say it like the Southern preacher, but maybe a little bit, for glory. Okay? So let's get practical. I want to read out of Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. So we usually do a head, heart, hands. I'm going to switch some things around as we close here today because I guess I'm the lead guy and I can't. Actually, Scripture mandates it. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. There's an old hymn. O soul, are you weary and troubled? No light in the darkness you see. There's light for a look at the Savior and life more abundant and free. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Also, start retraining your mind to think differently. Science has proven that there are like neural pathways that we just kind of get in ruts and not how we think. And we're going to have to be very intentional about how to change those pathways. So think about those things that are worthy of praise. Think about those things that are admirable, and praiseworthy, and good that we have all around us. And then finally, I'm going to invite you to do this. And I know this is going to be one of the more difficult things. Unplug and be still. I did something this week. I took an app off my phone that occupies too much of my time. Anybody know what it is? Facebook. Found myself just grabbing my phone like all the time. I'm like, it's not there. But by the end of the week, it was kind of liberating. It was kind of cool. So I'm just going to encourage you, maybe in a small way, unplug and take that time to be still this week. To listen to God, hear from God, ask God, to fill your mind with things that are not about the things of this world, but the things of eternity. Will you join me in prayer? Father in heaven, thank you. Thank you so much for the gift that you have given us, and that this world is not perfect, because if it were perfect, we would not have to rely on you. So we turn our eyes to Jesus. Thank you in his name.